Hi everyone, my name is Chris. This is my first personal video and probably my only one. I just wanted to share maybe the only interesting thing about my life that some people may identify with and maybe find some strength in. Stories about how I met my father for the first time last year when I was 43. Probably the only time I will ever meet him. So, that's something I gotta live with. But I'm happy that I met him and that I learned who he was, because that was something that I never knew. So first things first, my name is Chris. I live in the Netherlands. I am. I have two children, and I have a wife, and just had it on my heart to share this video. So take it or leave it. So let's start at the beginning a little bit. My mom had 3 kids from a previous marriage, divorced, and then became kind of promiscuous, you might say. Unfortunately, I'm not judging her for that. I've been a naughty boy myself, unfortunately, and she became pregnant again about 12 years after my brother, the youngest of the 3, was born, and nobody really knew who the father was, and my mom was keeping quiet. Also, she didn't realize she was pregnant until 6 months into the pregnancy. So, if you're promiscuous, it could be kind of a difficult task to understand who the father might be. And when I became like 5-6 years old, I started to ask my mom. I remember that pretty early on, and she would give me the roundabout. Usually, she would say she doesn't know who the father is, who my father is, or other times she would give me contradicting answers like, "Oh, that's your father," and she would point to a picture of a singer. And other times she would show me the picture of the father of my half brother and half sisters. That gave me some trust issues, because as a child you know that you're being lied to. So I was, again, I'm not blaming her that much, because she was very much troubled by the whole situation, and she just didn't know how to respond somehow. And it turned out after a while, when I became like a teenager, like 10, 11, I just stopped asking, because it was too painful, because I knew I was being lied to. And it felt kind of shameful, the whole thing, like how I was conceived. And I guess I had a lot of moral quarrels with the whole thing, to be honest. And started really telling myself, you know what, I don't need anyone. I don't need a father. I'm fine the way I am. I'll just raise myself. And I kind of tucked it all away, and people didn't really talk to me anyway about it. My sisters and brother rarely talked about it. Later on, when I became like 15, 16, my oldest sister started, sort of a lot of trips down memory lane. She became kind of obsessed with the past, and then I was part of that, of course, and she my sister had some mental problems as well, psychoses and manically depressed and stuff like that. So she got it in her head somehow that I was the son of her boyfriend from back in the day. Now you have to understand some background for that, of course. When I was born, my oldest sister was about 14 or 15, I should say. She had boyfriends in those days that were like 30 years old, and my mom was okay with that. So that, it's a shameful thing to say, but it's true. And she actually used to bring her boyfriend home, and he used to bring friends. And one of those friends stayed over one night, and then apparently my mother slept with him. This is a crazy story. I'm just warning you guys. This is not something you would write in a movie, because it would be too strange. So years later, my sister sort of gets this idea that this old boyfriend of hers might be my dad, and you can't really blame her, because my mom was always so vague about it. If you give so much misinformation, people are going to start making their own theories, I should say. So this became even more shame was piled onto me, I felt, even though I wasn't talking to anyone about it, and I didn't want to talk to my sister about this thing. She was quarreling with my mom about this, and my mom was denying it. She said, no, it was the friend of your boyfriend. wasn't your actual boyfriend that I slept with, blah 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 blah. And of course, on the sideline, I knew this discussion was going on, and everybody was just taken aback by it because it was so strange, such a strange theory. I never really believed it, but you know, and what the funny thing that happened is within the family, also with me, is that we all kind of developed tunnel vision. What I mean by that is that we all started thinking it's either one of those two guys. So it's either the friend or it became like the only two options. And I put as little thought as I could into all this. So this was a theory that I accepted myself as well. Years go by, and a couple of years go by, I should say, and actually I'm 18 now, and my sister has reunited with that boyfriend, and she still feels strongly about her theory. And then basically he denied it. My mom kept denying it, but she kept believing it because she was delusional, I have to say. The crazy part is that my sister then had a kid with that old boyfriend. They had a new relationship, and this time they had a kid, her second child. And if her theory would have been correct, my nephew would have also been my little brother. So that can happen in life, but to have to know that your sister willingly did that, that's kind of crazy. So I kept putting away all this shame and all this hurt that I was probably feeling somewhere, but I was really the cool guy in all of this. I was the one saying, don't worry about anything. I don't care who it is. I don't need him. I don't need anyone. I don't need to know. I don't need to. But of course, in your heart, you're obviously dying to know who you look like, who you resemble. But the options given were not that attractive, of course. If it was my, even if that friend was my dad, or if in the worst case scenario, the boyfriend of my sister was my dad, that would be, I didn't even want to know. You can't really blame me, I guess. Fast forward, I keep silencing everybody about it. I just don't talk to people about it anymore. I mean, I kind of, at that point, I kind of felt like everybody was too late. When I was a kid, I could have used a lot of support. I could have used, even one time, one of my family members walking into my room and sitting down and saying, hey man, you probably feel really shitty about this. Nothing ever happened because my family was raised by my mom, and my mom doesn't talk. My mom is a very passive person, and we became very passive, and we had to out wrestle that sort of that baggage, that luggage that we were carrying. And it's still hard to this day to do that. I'm still sometimes very passive, but I'm trying to learn, you could say. Fast forward, I become a father. It's a cliche, but then you start to think about life, and you start to think that, okay, there's a grandfather for this son of mine out there somewhere. I have to tell you that I became a father kind of late. I was 40 when I had my first child, so a long time had passed, but I was ready to look for it. Also, my mom was really sick. We thought we were going to lose her, and I wanted to ask the hard questions finally. And this was very, very difficult. You can imagine me sort of, the enormous wall that I had built to not talk about her, to not give her the satisfaction, you might say, or to not give her any position where she could hurt me again with her answers. I held on to that for like years and years until I was 42. And that's when I became more open to the idea of, let's talk to her about it. Let's find out what she has to say. So I go to her. I live on the other side of the Netherlands now, so I go to her for these questions, and she points me to that friend again, the friend of the boyfriend of my sister. And I'm in the tunnel vision still. I'm like, okay, I guess, I'm going to believe you and not my sister, because that's a crazy theory. I'm going to believe you. So I get the name, because they always had the name, and to be honest, they told me once, when I was about 18. But again, everything was so tucked away, and I really told myself that I don't need to know. Then I forgot the name. That's how buried it was for me. But I get the name again because I'm finally ready to talk. I look him up. I find him immediately, not on Facebook or anything, but on a website for volunteer teachers in computer lessons for some library. And it's near where I grew up, so it all makes sense. And he's a redhead, which I'm not, but they always told me that he was a redhead, blah, blah, blah. And it's a funny side story that once I had a bit of an Eminem period when I was such an idiot that I wanted to get my hair dyed blonde. And it actually was ruined because the hairdresser told me I have orange or redhead pigment. So it was on top, it was messed up. So that kind of stuck with me, like, oh, that sort of confirmed for me, like, oh, my dad is a redhead, I guess. So I look him up, and I decide to just go with the one lead that I have, and that is to just email this secretary of the library and say, okay, could you please give my contacts to this person? It's a very personal question that I have for him. You would do me a huge favor. A few days later, this was 2022, so 2 years back, I get an email back from her a couple days later, and she says, I'm very sorry, but he died 9 days ago. That was like, I mean, at this point, I've become a Christian like 10 years prior, so I'm like, God, what is this supposed to mean? I miss him by 9 days after waiting for 42 years? What is up with that? But I had gone so far now that I was willing to take further action. So I thought, you know what, I'll just email her back saying I'm sorry, and maybe he has family that you know, and you could forward this email to them. She said she would, but I never heard anything back from any relative or anything. So I went to different steps. I took a DNA test for myheritage.com, and I also emailed this show. They look like a Dutch TV show where they find biological mothers and fathers, etc. And I was I emailed them my whole story that I just told you, basically, with all the shamefulness to these theories. So they called me back weeks later. By now I had gotten my results from MyHeritage, but I couldn't really see much because I didn't have access to all the family trees and everything else. So it was difficult for me to learn anything from that. And they said, you know what, we'll look into it, and perhaps we'll make a TV show out of it. They came back weeks later. They looked into my heritage. I gave them my codes and everything, and they said, we're not going to make a TV show. It's too damaging for your mom. So, I kind of get it. But we will share our notes with you, and actually, we think you can find your dad pretty quickly with this information. So I sat down, and they said, remember the two guys you emailed about? You gave me their names. Forget about those guys. So the whole theory with these two guys that I was ashamed of, especially the one, of course, where he was my sister's boyfriend, was shot dead. And it was a relief, obviously. I was like, wow. And the tunnel vision opened up. I was like, oh, of course, there could be other guys. Can't believe I didn't think about that. And they said, we have seen in your DNA matches that there's a cousin of your dad that is in your matches. And for me, it just said in the archives, it just said full cousin of a parent. I didn't know which one. They figured it out somehow, and through all the family trees, and they said she has cousins with the last name Moeller, and she, however many cousins she has, one of those is your biological father. So we advise you to just contact her. So I did. Found her on Facebook. She emailed me back, or she messaged me back really quickly, like a day later or something. And she said, yeah, I have three cousins that lived really close to you, like same street, and approximately the same ages, and I'll give you their names. And I was very, very thankful. I mean, I was astonished at how easily she gave up those names, but I was very happy. And at this point, I thought, it's time to confront my mom first. I looked up these three men. Now I had some first names, of course, 3 first names as well. Only one I could find on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And immediately I thought, wow, now that's a guy who resembles me, or who I resemble. The other guy with the red hair, I never saw anything there that resembled me. I called my mom up. Again, I'm on the other side of the country, so I can't just visit her. But at this point, I wanted answers quickly. I call her up. I say, Mom, remember the guy you told me about who was my father? And she's like, yeah, he's dead, right? Remember, my mom is 80 plus at this point. And she's still alive today, by the way. Yeah, he's dead, right? Yeah, he's dead. But could you imagine it being anyone else? Was there anyone else who could be my dad, my father? And she said, no, I really can't, because I didn't do that with men. I pushed men off, actually, because God doesn't want that. And at this point, it sort of clicked, because I knew different, of course. And at that moment, I knew that my mom was just feeding me, also on other occasions, whatever I wanted to hear, because she knew I had become a Christian. And there was an earlier moment during one of these talks that she also referred to God in a way that she never did before. And now the second time it clicked, like, oh, you just want to tell me what you want me to hear. Because I knew she was lying. She was very promiscuous. Even when I was young, I have memories of men coming in, disgusting men coming over, wanting something from my mom, and her letting them in. And so I told her, well, I kind of took the scientific route with DNA, tried to explain it to her. She didn't understand. And I said, does the name Mulder mean anything to you? And I specifically gave her only the last name, so in the hopes that she would fill in the rest. And she did. She was very, very shocked. I always say she responded like a teenager that got caught and doesn't know how she got caught. So her reaction was really like, what? Huh? What? And then she started spilling the beans really quickly. She said, yeah, and I won't say his first name, but yeah, X, Mulder, yeah. That's the guy. I wanted to marry him, and I was crazy about him. And I just asked her, I said, why? Because now, at this point, I know for sure, in that second, I knew that has to be the one, unless she had intercourse with all 3, the guys, but no, I knew this was the guy. So I asked her, why did you never say anything? And she didn't tell anyone, and she was willing to she was prepared to go to the grave with this, because like I said, we thought we lost her a couple years before. And she said it was about shame. She was very much ashamed because he was the son of her friend, perhaps her best friend at the time, who was someone living around the corner from us, and the kids from our house, this was before I was born, came to her house often, and vice versa. And he was a babysitter, actually. He babysat my other siblings before I was conceived, you see. And he was about 19 at the time, and my mom was about 38. So you can see why that was a shameful situation in any time. It's not about like, oh, this was the late 70s. No, this would be a shameful thing today if you have a child with your best friend's son. That's crazy, right? But it happened. So he must have been about 20 when he's 20 years older than me. I know that by now. And my mom was 39 when I was born, and always kept it quiet. Always talked about other guys, and I'm not sure if she knew that he was the one, but she must have known that he was a candidate. that he was one of the people that could be my father, my biological father. So, by the way, I never had a substitute father or something, or a stepdad or anything. My mom never remarried or had any relationship of any meaning. So I never had a father figure, which I'm fine with. I mean, it is what it is. I'm trying to keep it short, but I know I'm already talking very long. Well, the only thing left to do was to contact him, obviously. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you an important thing. When I was talking to my mom on the phone, I asked her why didn't she tell me. She told me all that. The thing that hurt me the most was that after all that, and she knew I was searching for him, she said, "Hey, but you're not going to go look for him, are you?" Because she was still ashamed. Her friend from back in the day never left that neighborhood, still lives there. Although my mom never gets outside anymore. She can't really. She's sick. But she still doesn't want anyone to know that they had a relationship, even though I am the product of that relationship and I'm looking for my father. She still told me that, and she was still looking out for herself. So I'm not here to throw my mom under the bus. She gave me a roof over my head. She fed me. I'm grateful for that, but other than that, she didn't give me much. And this remark, yeah, my heart sank. I have to be honest, And I remember walking downstairs after that call, because I hung up really quick after that. Went downstairs to my wife. She was cooking. My son was in the living room watching television. And she grabbed me. She said, "What happened?" Or actually, she said, "And how did it go?" I grabbed her and I started crying, and I said, she's lied to me my whole life. So even though I just learned for a fact who my father was, the betrayal by my mom that was so significant and so real at that moment was what just kind of overshadowed everything. And I started crying. I'm not a sobber, so it wasn't a loud cry. It was a soft cry, but it was enough for the tension in the room to start coming. And I guess my son felt it or heard it, and he came shuffling into the kitchen on his little socks, and he said, "Daddy?" Because he doesn't see me that way. He was about 1.5 or 2 at this point. And I just hugged him and my wife at the same time, and it was as if God was saying in that moment, like, this is why you had to wait so long. Remember, I was a late bloomer. I didn't marry until I was 37. Didn't become a father until I was 40. Perhaps I would have went to a dark place if I had been all alone to process this information. But I had my family, something I never had before, a real family. I made my own family, as so to speak. And that foundation is what keeps me sane. It helped me relativate everything and know that I need them. I don't need that man who is my father, or that woman even who is my mother. So next step was obviously getting in touch with my father. I found him on LinkedIn, told him about it. He was very standoffish, like, "What are you even saying to me right now?" He's saying that he doesn't recognize the name of my mom. My brother was smart. He helped out. He said, "Try our last name." So they have a different last name, and they were kind of known with that name in the neighborhood back in the day. So he said, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah." And, well, long story short, we hooked up for the paternity test. I went back to my hometown, talked to him for about 20 minutes over a cup of coffee, looked into his eyes, saw the resemblance. He must have seen it too. And then I told him, I said, I appreciate that you're willing to do this test. He doesn't have to do that, after all those years. I'm a 43-year-old man sitting in front of him. He's only 63, so we're kind of like almost generation, the same generation, And he said, "Well, no problem, you deserve to know." And then he said, "But I hope you understand me too when I say that I don't want any contact after this. I don't want to create a bond or anything. I don't need that in my life. I'm fine with the way things are, and you're just too old. If you had been 10 years old, maybe that would have made a big difference. but this is just late. And that kind of made my heart sink again. I kind of, estimating who he would be after talking to him on LinkedIn and everything, I kind of thought that it might go this way. I was definitely thinking about it. But of course you hope for more. You hope that you're going to make up for lost time, And he has children, other children as well. I would have loved to have met them. Nothing is really stopping me from contacting them, but I just don't want to go past him, like that. He doesn't want his mother to know that I exist, and that's a bitter pill, because I've always felt like I was a secret in people's lives, and I really was, and now I still am. It's on my side of the family, or my mother's side, it's the cat is out of the bag, but on his side, not yet. But maybe after his mother dies and he grieves, and then he maybe finds the room for me to come into his life. I told him that. I told him, well, not that, but I told him, if you ever change your mind, my door is open. So, two things that I just want to really quickly say about this. I became a Christian about 12 years ago, and some of you don't want to hear this, but I was never into Christianity or any religion, and it really changed my life a lot. And after, let me say it like this: before I was a Christian, I didn't go through anything, nothing positive, nothing negative, just emptiness. Became a Christian when I was 32, and everything started happening in my life. Everything, mostly good, started happening. And well, for me, it's clear. I'm not saying become a Christian and your life will get better, but your life will get meaning. That's what I'm trying to say. Your life will get purpose. If there's anyone out there who wants to share their story or talk about it, or wants me to tell them how I cope with everything because they had a similar story, just let me know. We'll see how it goes. All right. Peace. Bye-bye.